So, as I said this afternoon, we are going to cover a very small part of what Teams is capable of, and I'm sure there will be questions coming from it. If there's a question that relates to one of the future sessions, I will keep it and I will then make sure that we address it there. Or if you've got something relating to what we're doing this afternoon, I'll do my best to ensure you leave with the answers that you need. So at Turn It On, we are a Microsoft partner. So this session is delivered in conjunction with Microsoft, and we will be looking not only today but into the future about how you can achieve the most by using Teams, particularly during this challenging time where we've often got pupils at home and we've got remote learning taking place. We're trying to grapple with the technology. Them and their parents might be contacting us as well. And what we're trying to do through these webinars is get you familiar with what Teams can do for you and also make you confident with using it. So we're going to have a look today about how to set up Teams, find our way around Teams a little bit, and then look at the first section, which is posts. As I said earlier, we're happy to take questions during the session, and I'll pause at various points, and you can just either unmute your mic or pop something into the chat. One of the first questions I often have is, well, great, we've got Teams, but how on earth can we access it? It's available on pretty much any platform whatsoever. So it can go on a Windows computer. It works on Windows 10. You could either install the app or you can access it through most major modern web browsers. The same would go for if you're working on an Apple computer or if you're working on a Chromebook. It will even run on something called Linux, which is an alternative operating system. The best web browsers to use with it would be the Microsoft Edge browser. That's the new version of the Microsoft Edge browser based on Chromium. You can tell the difference between that and the old one because the new one has a turquoise E on it. You could use something like Google Chrome or Firefox. If you're working on a Mac, it's in preview in Safari web browser on Mac. It quite frequently works okay in Safari web browser. However, I tried to use it yesterday with a school and it wasn't functioning as I expected. So remember, the Safari browser is in preview, so you can always download the Microsoft Edge browser on your computer and it will go from there. Quite a few people have contacted me saying, well, that's all well and great, but my pupils haven't even got a computer at home. They're working off of a tablet or a mobile phone. And I wholly accept, having previously been a teacher myself, that it's more difficult on a smaller screen. But there are dedicated Teams apps and Office 365 apps it can install on most major brands of tablet, including Android and Apple iOS. And pupils will be able to certainly watch and participate in video live lessons, watch videos back, be able to engage in posts in Teams, which we'll look at in a little bit. And though it's not the perfect experience, it's much, much better than not being able to get involved at all. When you're coming to set your teams up, you need to have a think about how you want to structure your teams themselves. It's up to you whether you are going to do this process manually or whether you're going to use something like School Data Sync from Microsoft, and there's lots of other third-party products that do very similar jobs. If you're working in a primary school, you might want to set up your teams based on your physical classrooms in school. If you're working in a secondary school, you might want to set up your teams based on a subject and then have these things called channels. And if some of you don't know what channels are, I will go through what channels are in a bit. There's subdividers in a team and have them set up as a different year group in the subject. So if you were a teacher in a secondary school and you taught science, for instance, and you taught year 7 set 2 and year 8 set 3, in your science team you would see all those sets down the side as different channels. If you decide that you don't want to manage your team yourself, you can install a sync tool like School Data Sync or one of the many other tools out there like Active Cloud Management that will link up with your MIS system, whatever it is, be it Capita Sims, RM Integris, ScholarPack, Arbor, Bromcom, and it will then read the data from your MIS system database for pupils and staff, things such as their full-name and their surname and which class they're in, and then it will automatically enroll them in the correct team and manage all of that, adding the appropriate pupils or staff to the teams or removing them if they leave, or if a member of staff moves from teaching one class to the next. All of that's taken care of automatically, and that's one of the major advantages of having a sync tool compared to having to manage that yourself, because then someone will need to administer those changes possibly every day if you've got a lot of change in your school. You'll also need to make sure that you've applied the correct policies, so that there are certain restrictions for safeguarding so that pupils are working in a safe environment, and class teams automatically have certain restrictions on them compared to staff teams. But you'll probably need to go in and configure some additional policies as well. And we aren't going to get too much into the tech side today, turn it on and offer additional services and courses on that, but you'll just need to make sure that you go into Office 365, go to something called the Teams Admin Center, and make sure certainly that things like education policies are applied so that it's a safe environment for you and your pupils to be in. When you come to set up a team, you'll get one of four options. You're either going to have a class team, which is suitable for teaching and learning, and that's both for primary and secondaries, in fact, whichever educational setting you're in. You could have PLC teams, and those work best if you're in a trust and you're working with schools. Staff teams are better for the staff inside of a school, and then other teams are, if you really aren't sure what sort of team you want, other team broadly covers a lot of different areas, and it's a bit of a catch-all, but it's a good option to pick if you're just not sure at the moment. So to recap that, class teams for teaching and learning, professional learning communities for things like trusts or governors, and staff teams for face-to-face teams. You can have now up to 5,000 members in a team, which is quite a lot. So that covers a lot of scopes, particularly with secondary schools. And then the use of it, I at the moment haven't found a school that's hit the ceiling with using teams and the amount of pupils or students you can get enrolled into a team or using a certain aspect of teams. And there are plenty of scope to carry on making sure that you've got space to add further pupils or students in. I'm going to break out of the presentation at this point and jump across to the live session and show you this for real. I'm just going to go and check if anyone's got any questions over there. I can see there's one question. Just want you see that pupil address? Yes. So if you're going to set up a pupil in Teams, you will need to get them a Office 365 an account. That doesn't mean they've got an email address. What that does mean is that they've got an account to log into Teams. And if you're setting up pupils or students, I'd advocate having something as a prefix to their name so you can identify them. So a lot of schools that we work with use the year of entry. So if they were early years pupils coming in this year and you happen to have them using Teams, you'd have 20 before John.Smith. And you then know when you're looking at them in a administrative perspective, you know which year group they're from. If it's in Teams itself, they also can have a display name, when the display name could be slightly different as well. So it's thinking about that planning that goes in before you start to use Teams face-to-face with pupils and with parents. Another question here. Trying to set up a small classroom for the first time, several private channels in it, but when I schedule a lesson meeting, those channels don't appear on the list, and that channel only shows general channel. Okay, so you with a private channel, you will only see it if you are the owner of it or you've been made a member of that private channel. Otherwise, the idea of a private channel is that it's not visible to anybody else, and it's almost hidden so that you wouldn't have an awareness that it was there. So you, unlike a standard channel is visible and open to everyone. You can see them. So let me go in and I'll show you what I mean about that for everybody else who isn't quite sure what I'm talking about. When you make a channel, if you're doing it manually, you press the three dots on a team, you go to add a channel, and you get a choice down the bottom of a standard channel. That means it's open so everyone can see it and they can request to join it. Or you can have a private channel, and as it says, it's not visible to anyone else and it's private to the people that are enrolled within it. So in my example staff team here, I've got things such as a business manager channel, and for obvious reasons, because it relates to finance, that's a private channel, so only maybe the business manager and the head teacher of the school would be able to see that because they're enrolled into it. But otherwise, you have a standard channel, and that would be visible to everybody. So if I was logging in here and I wasn't an administrator, I wouldn't see any of these padlocked private channels, but I would see general, and I would see the SLT channel, which is standard, and I would see the whole school channel. If I'm not a member of them, I can click on them and I can request to join them, and then the owner can either approve that or deny it. But if you've created the private channel, you should see it. If somebody else created it on your behalf, you'll need to make sure that they add you in as an owner, otherwise it wouldn't be visible to you. Great. Perfect. Let's have a look around Teams itself. So as far as the orientation of buttons and where things are, that's where we're going to start today. It is getting started with Teams, and it's very much from the ground up. So you have an activity feed and the buttons on the left, and this is a universal view. Just depending on whether you are a member of staff or a pupil, you see exactly the same thing. And you can see here activity that's taken place. Now in my demo version, clearly there hasn't been a lot of activity until recently. People have been having some time off for Christmas, but you will see a feed of recent events down here and they will show up for you. If it's something that you've read, it will be in normal text. If it's something that's new in your feed, you'll have a red dot over the activity because that's a notification to signify there's something new there, and this text would be in bold. If you want to change your notifications, you need to go up to your name here, and this can't be done from the admin console. You go to Settings and Notifications. Then in here, you get to change the different notifications you would like to have for all of the features that you have in Teams. So if it's chat, you can go to Edit, and you can choose whether you'd like, for instance, to have banners scrolling in from the side of the screen. Now that might not be appropriate if you're a class teacher, and when we get back to face-to-face teaching, if you've got 30 pupils with you in a class, and the banner comes scrolling in from the side with the name of the person and the first line of the conversation, there may be something sensitive in there they shouldn't see. So if I was a class teacher, I think I would disable banner and have it only in my feed, so I get the bold text and the red dots to inform me there's something new in there. But if I was working maybe as a member of the office or admin team, I maybe want banners because it can scroll in and I can just see if it's important to me and I can answer straight away, or I can leave it to a point where I'm not busy doing something else and I can come back to that message. So there's lots of customization to do in chats and meetings and so forth. And you will spend the first couple of days just checking that you've got your level of notifications to suit you and that you don't miss something. It's one of those things where take a little time to play around with it and you'll soon find what suits you for your role in school. Because somebody else has asked another question here about private channels, and I've created a private channel, but I can only add members of students on the main class, not to the separate channels. I can add students to separate channel. That may depend on how you've got your groups set up on the account side, and if they are set up so that you can't add them across, that could prevent you. It also may mean if they've been put into a directory somewhere that you can't get to them. If they aren't in those two groups, then you should be able to search, and I'll show you that now. Is it something I was going to come over to? So that's fine. Let's jump into there. So Teams, and if I wanted to add someone in here, I go to the dots, manage team, then I should be able to search for someone here. So if I search for anything want to come up for me? No. Maybe Deborah's already in my group. Let's search for that. There we go. So search there for the head teacher in my example here. I can start typing in if I want and it's there. I can search for the person in the team, check if they're there. If you're saying they aren't, then you go over here to add member. This box comes up and this now looks at your Office 365 for your whole school, and providing that you've got access to the student group, you should be able to type in here and find people, whether they're teachers or whether they're pupils. Let's see if I can find a pupil in here. So once they're in there, you can add them and then you choose what their role is in the team, whether they're a member or whether they can be an owner, which means they have administrative rights. And then you just press close. If you want to get rid of them, you just press the cross there. Or if you've added them in and you don't want him to stay as there, you go down to just downgrade him to a member. And then he will appear in the staff demo down there for me. And if I want to get rid of him altogether, press the cross and out he goes. That's how to do it if you're managing that manually. If you're using one of the sync tools, that will override your ability to do that. And if you do even manage to add them in, when the sync runs next time, it will replace them with who is picked up in your MIS system for that particular class or for that particular team. So there's a couple of ways to do that, but first of all you need to make sure that you've got access to the users to be able to add them in at the same time. So you just need to check that. I've got Leslie, you got your hand up.
Hi, yes, I was the one who asked that question. I was just typing, but okay, I've got that far. I've done that. What I'm wondering is if you look down your separate channels under your staff demo team, let's say you wanted to add 5 particular members into just the SLT channel or the admin team. How do you do that? Oh, I see. You've got the add members
Manage channel, and then you would go into here and you need to check your permissions, but it's easier if instead, so to manage the overall channel is quite easy there, but to manage these, so to manage the overall team is quite easy there, but to manage these channels here, it's easier to do from the admin side. So yes, you could do it yourself, but you're better getting a ticket raised and having someone do it from what's called the Office 365 admin center side than trying. But you have got a managed channel there for some options, but actually managing people is easier to do on the admin side than it is from here as an end user.
Right. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. So notifications are there, and when you get notifications, the same thing works for your teams. You get dots on your teams. You've got chat here, which we'll come back to another day, but that's where you can get to chat between staff, and here is where you find your teams. The next button is assignments. There's more than one way to get to assignments, but once we come on to setting assignments in one of the future sessions, that's where you can reach assignments. You've also got your personal Office 365 calendar in here, and that's mimicking your calendar that you would have in Outlook. So whatever you add in Outlook will pull through to here, or whatever you add in here will pull back to Outlook. The two sync. It's your personal calendar. It's not any shared calendars in school. We will be running an entirely different session later this academic year about adding shared calendars into Teams, but we won't cover that now because it's a bit more advanced than an introductory session. The bottom option here, calls, it's probably going to be redundant in most schools unless you've upgraded your Office 365 license. And you can use Teams to replace the telephony in your school. So instead of having a traditional contract for making internal and external calls, everything can be routed over the internet through Teams, but you would need to upgrade your Office 365 license to do that. So calls, ignore it in most cases. It probably wouldn't get used in your school. And then down the bottom here where you got the ellipses, there will be some other options that you can look at, such as you can get to the files there as well, but we'll cover all of those in future sessions. If you need to download a desktop copy of Teams, and I'm working today out of a tab in the Edge browser from Microsoft, you can just press the download button in the bottom left-hand corner, and providing you've got administrative rights on your laptop or your desktop computer from school, you will be able to install the Teams app. There isn't a great deal of difference between the experience, whether you're using the desktop app or whether you're using the web browser. It's probably just a couple of clicks less when you open up the app because it remembers you in the app and it doesn't always remember you in the browser unless you've been remembering all your passwords. I'll come to the next question in just a moment. I'm just going to jump into different types of posts. So here I've got a staff team and I've got a class team. Where I was showing you earlier about joining or creating teams, if you haven't got a school data sync, that's where you can go to create a team and you get those options. So class teams, teaching and learning, PLCs, trusts and governors, staff being teaching staff. And then once you've made them, you will see them stacked up here. And you're only going to see a team if you've been enrolled into that team and you're supposed to be seeing it. Otherwise, you might be oblivious. There could be several other teams in your school, but you won't see them. A lot of the schools that we work with have a staff team and have various class teams. You may have intervention teams depending on what you've got. And if you're a trust, you might have a trust team and you may also set up governors teams. So teams got a huge amount of scope as to how you want to engage with different groups of people in your school and make them feel connected, particularly during this challenging time when we're looking at distance learning. We're all having to connect remotely. We're maybe not seeing people face to face, particularly around pupils and their mental well-being, and teams can be a really quick and easy way to get a discussion going. So if it was in a staff team, you've got posts as a tab on every single team you set up. It's universal across all team types regardless. Some of the other options aren't, but posts are. And what you have here is the ability to talk with your staff as a whole. So I mentioned the word channels earlier. When you go into a team, every team will have a general channel, and then you can create these additional channels here. Now, they'll either be done from the administrative side, or you can click on the dots and you can go to add channel there, like I showed you earlier about a private or a standard channel. You can have channels stacking up here, but you need to decide whether they are going to be private, in other words, not visible to anyone that isn't joined to it, or standard, visible and people can request, and then you choose who you want to enroll into those channels. You can have separate discussions. So if I went to my business manager channel, there was a discussion here about budget and the fact we're going to review it in a few weeks' time. That discussion there was entirely private, and it stays within the business manager channel. So it's not meant to be viewed by the whole staff in the school. And generally, no pun intended, in the general channel, all staff are a member of the general channel, because you want to communicate across the school regardless of role, so everyone gets something that you need to get to them, whether it's a please read, we're changing the end of the day, or we're going to have a meeting with a parent, or we've got an internal moderation meeting, or whatever it is. All staff are supposed to see those sorts of notifications, but the reason you have a channel is to separate your posts, so you can then just chat with a particular audience rather than have a general discussion that everyone in the school can see at once. So the channels are there for a lot of reasons, but also to tailor the different types of posts and make sure that if it is general, it does go all general, or if not, it stays in a smaller, restricted audience. Helen, I can see you've got a question there about channels. So channel question, if you want to change a private channel back to a standard channel, how do you do that? Okay, so it's again something that you can do as an end user, but it's tricky. It's easier to do it from the Teams admin center. So if you're logging in as an administrator that administrates the whole of Office 365, you can go to the Teams admin center and you can change the type of team more easily there. The drop-down box is visible and you can change from standard to private. So I would always say do it that way. It's easier. It's just fiddlier, and it doesn't always take when you're doing it outside. It is a slightly annoying feature that when you create a channel, it's obviously easy to do when you pick it up from here and you've got your options there. There are ways to do it. Let me see if it works for me today. This didn't work last time, but I will try it. So if I go to general channel, manage channel, and it's not there for me today. Let me just try over here, manage team, channels, and that was private. No, it's not going to let me hear from here, I don't think. Let me just check. No. No, it's not from this side. So I would always say go from the admin side. There was an option for a little while, and it doesn't appear to be there at the moment, where you could go back and you could change your channel type from over here, but it's certainly not letting me today. And I'll just check an admin channel that has been restricted. Let's try edit this channel in case it's in there. No. It doesn't look like it's there. So in the admin side, raise a support ticket, it's Teams admin center, change the type of channel you've got, and then you can change from a standard to a private, and that allows you to move in between. With the posts, the same post theory works whether you are in a staff team or whether you're in a teaching and learning team, a class team. Whatever you post will be visible to everyone, and to make a post you start a new conversation, and it works in the same way. So I think I might do that over in the class team as we've been in the staff team for a little while. And if I went to new conversation down here, by default you've got a text box that you can type a message in. So please read the lesson starter, and that might be for my pupils. But if I want to have something more than just a text-based comment, I could send it like that, and the little arrow down there looks a little bit like a paper aeroplane would send that message out. But at the same time, if you hit the A with the paintbrush next to it, that's the editing tool. And once you are in a post section of a class team or a staff team, you start to get more options about how to post and send communications out to everybody that's in that channel or in that team. So in here, I've got my title and I've got my main body of text. Along the row at the top, I've got different formatting options like you would have in a word processor, so you can change things like bolds and italics and types of fonts and colors of fonts. You have bullet points and tables. If you follow the ellipses, there will always be some extra options hidden in there. Depending on the size of your screen, it will then dictate how many get condensed off the end of the row on the right hand side and into there. But you've got options in there such as marking a message as important, and then that flags and it's extra emphasis for the pupil reading it. You can turn off the important tag. You can have tables in here. You can also embed links. The link could be just the URL to the website. So this is a class team. It might be that I would want them to go and do an exercise on maybe My Maths, if it was in a primary school, and that could be the address there. Or you can have that embedded within some text as a hyperlink. So it could be please click here. And then when you pop the URL in there and press insert, it will then display on the screen with that logged in there. So there's quite a bit of scope about the way you want that formatted, but you've also got options down the bottom here which will affect what you get in your post. So you can attach files, and the paperclip allows you to get into there. You can go and pick up files in your OneDrive, which is your personal area for storage of files and folders in Office 365. And in there, you just delve through until you get to the file you want and press upload a copy, and it will attach to the bottom of the post. You can go in and you can upload from your computer. So if you're going in and you are picking up something, maybe you're going into a file and folder, you keep delving down until you get to that. I'm just going to cancel that. Or you can browse in here inside of your team, and then you think, well, actually, do you know what? I've got a colleague, if we're in a 2-form entry school, that's got something else that's really good. So I can go up out of my general channel and I can dip into another team. So if I went into there and I went to general, and if there was anything in there, I could then pick up from their folder and their file. I could insert the resource that I've got in there. So it's probably not a good example because I haven't got a file in there, but it would then attach on the bottom. The other way of doing it is to go to your recently edited files, and then that will pick up something from your recently edited jump list, and you can bring it in from there. So there's lots of ways that you can attach files to posts. Posts are really useful for communicating with everybody within your channel or your team as a whole, but they're not so useful for in-class teams sending work out and getting work back in. And in the future sessions, we'll be looking at assignments and we'll be looking at class notebook, and they're a much better way of managing work with pupils and students than sending it out in a post in a class team. It sometimes works better with staff, and I'll show you an example of why it's not a good idea to do it in posts in a minute. You will have emojis to use. They're an education version of emojis. Pupils will as well. They'll probably want to get that out of their system initially, and there's also an education version of Giphies. And in class teams, stickers are quite useful if you are happy with something a pupil's been doing. If I'm teaching, I usually pop a sticker in as a quick way of responding and notifying to a pupil that I'm acknowledging what they've said, or I'm really happy with what they've done or the contribution they've made to the learning in the lesson. You can also add in recorded videos, and it's something we'll cover in another session about how to record videos in Teams, and then they go into Stream. There's been some changes recently that, depending on how far along your upgrades are to your Office 365 tenancies, in other words, that's the Office 365 you use in your school, they used to all go to Stream for recording, but some of the new videos that recorded automatically now don't go to Stream, and they just get posted into the post section of your particular channel or your team, and they will stay there for 20 days and they will disappear after 20 days. So recorded videos, either pick them up from Stream, but the new version embeds here. Bear in mind, from a safeguarding perspective, you need to advise pupils about what appropriate behaviour is. We recommend having cameras off from pupils and microphones off unless they're participating in a live lesson, because there could be something going on in the background. But if you're recording a video and your Office 365 is moved over to the new version of recording and it posts here when you press stop recording, then that's going to be there for 20 days. And there's absolutely no way of deleting that. We've got some questions in with Microsoft at the moment to ask about making that possible, but then your video would be there. But if you're doing it via the old way and you're posting it from a recording you had in stream, you've got control because you can delete the post. So posts aren't there forever. Along the top, you've also got some options about starting a new conversation. So that's similar to having the title and the main body of text like we have there. You could make an announcement and then you get a banner which comes in across the top. You can use that to emphasize a post. So it could be red for urgent. You can also either choose an illustration from Microsoft or upload your own image, but you can make your announcements stand out. And then you can have a headline up here. So instead of it being please read down below, it could be please read up there. So wouldn't use them all the time. I tend to use them when I want to draw an emphasis to something that's important or something that's urgent that I want a pupil to read or a member of staff to read. But they are there to drop in as and when you require them. By default, unless you choose a policy that's restricting it, everyone in a class team and a staff team will be able to reply to a post. If you want to restrict how people can reply, instead of it saying everyone can reply, if you choose only moderators can reply, that's people that own or administrate the channel or the team, and then the reply button disappears for most other people that are members, and then that's useful if you just want to push a message out. If you also want to not just post in the team that you are in, and you want to post across multiple teams, that's possible. You click on the post in multiple channels, you choose select channels, and if I'm in primary team and my parallel class, maybe I've got a joint year 2 class here, I want to post into the general section of their team, I tick that and I press update. And a little bit like if you're adding people in as a CC on an email or a BCC, it will now distribute out and post to all of those channels at once, which means I don't have to go between lots of different teams and repost the same thing. So there's quite a few options there about posting, and they work universally regardless of whether you're in a class team or whether you're in a staff team or a PLC. It works the same way. So I've got a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm just going to nip back across. Can you delete a child's post? Yes, you can delete a child's post. So as long as you are appointed as the owner of the class team, I'm just going to get rid of my post there and discard that because I don't need it. If it was something like here, there was a picture of a fire outside the window of the classroom and it starts a discussion going on about the Great Fire of London. If this was a member of staff here, you don't have permission to delete other members of staff, but if this was a pupil here, I click on the ellipses up the top, and I wouldn't have an edit because that's my own comment. What I would have is a delete, and then I can delete the pupil's post. It disappears from the view of other pupils or students, but for me it then appears as a grey ghosted post, and if I needed to I could reference that. So let's say a parent then subsequently got in contact because they weren't happy with what was said in the class team. You can then pick that up and you could use that to talk to the parent. It's gone for them, but it's not for you. So yes, you can delete it. And if you don't want pupils replying, you can disable the ability to reply. And again, that's a policy, so you need to bring that with a ticket to your IT support, and that can be disabled. But I would always advocate trying to get pupils to take ownership of talking sensibly to each other and responsibly to the teacher, because there's far more benefit, particularly in a distance learning scenario, to them being able to communicate with you and easily get an answer to a question, rather than having their parents phoning into school or sending an email to the inquiry address and then you having to go back to the parent or the pupil because they didn't understand something. It's far, far easier if they can just respond in the team. If you need to suspend a pupil for a while, you can, and again, that's best done from an administrative side, but then talk to them, explain to them what the failings of their behaviour was, talk about what your expectations are, and then enrol them back in so that they can reply and chat. I've got another question here about, can I upload a video as an attachment and a post? Yes, you can. They need to be MP4 format, so you can record a video, for instance, in Xbox Recorder on your computer. So you could press Windows key G, which has got the recording function in there. Might be a PowerPoint that you've recorded, and then you just upload it, but it needs to be in the correct file format. So an MP4 is the best one for that. The next question, if a channel is a pupil one, can one add a channel and Descript membership to add an attachment? So no, it's an all or nothing, I'm afraid, in a channel. And when you're making a post and you attach a file, so let me scroll up and find an example of one that I've used up here. So it could be that we were going to have a math lesson and we were looking at shapes. Before we had the lesson, I wanted the pupils in my class to read that document. If I've attached that document, I can't be selective in who's able to view it or edit it. If it goes into posts, it will be available for absolutely everybody that's an owner or a member of this team. And when we come to future sessions, we'll have a look at the benefits of assignments in Class Notebook over limiting the audience of people having access to resources. That's another reason why posts is a good way of communicating or sending messages out, but it's not the vehicle for collecting and distributing work. If you had this example here, and this was actually a piece of work that pupils were picking up for document 1, they'd have to press the reply box, then they'd have to make a comment, attach the version they'd edited either in their OneDrive or on their computer and send it back to you, but then it would also be visible to all other pupils in the school. So a lot of the time that causes a great deal of sensitivity, either from the pupil or from their parents. So you wouldn't want to do it that way. Another problem with putting it in here and having it as an editable document is that when you click upon it, so this is document 1 that I'm clicking on there in the posts, everyone would end up in the same document if it's editable. So this is a Word document. One fantastic feature is the fact that Word, PowerPoint and Excel open inside of Teams. So Teams acts as a digital hub and people wouldn't have to go elsewhere. You can see here I've got Word has opened up inside of Teams itself, but when they started editing, they'd all be editing the same document, so they'd overwrite each other's work and it would then end up becoming a mess, which is why you would use other features in Teams that we'll look at in one of the future sessions, and you wouldn't use shapes. Here is an example, and you wouldn't use that post because it would end up getting destroyed or people would end up replying and you'd have 30 copies. That's what assignments in Class Notebook are designed for, and we'll cover how to use those for those purposes in the future session. I'll dip over and pick up another question. Can you delete the previous day's posts? You could go in and delete the previous day's posts if you wanted to stop that feed building up. A lot of pupils find it quite beneficial, particularly if it's around learning, to scroll back up and say, oh yeah, well I did have a homework set on mini beasts and one set on geography, or what was that discussion about the Great Fire of London yesterday, because I want to borrow some ideas out of that to put into my work. Or it could be, what are our lessons today? So yes, you can, and you simply go to, here's my post, press ellipses, and I can press edit or I can press delete, and there, sorry, and it will go again. You can do it that way, but I don't see a reason why you really would want to clear it unless you think it's going to be confusing very young pupils and they're going to start to struggle with finding their way back through the feed. They will always land at the bottom of the feed. Unfortunately, there's no way to reorder this or pin activities in the feed. They will always just form a conscious stream scrolling backwards, but they get quite used to having the last 3 on the page and then scrolling back up and seeing what's above. You think it would phase particularly some of the younger pupils, but it doesn't seem to. Let's go and check question over there. Can you repost a post? That's a good question, actually. Let me just see if I can work that one out. I don't think I've had that one yet. So if I took my post here and I've got my edit and delete, I wonder if I can copy a link. Let's see what happens. Oh, I've got more actions down there. No, let's see if I can copy a link. I'm going to nip over into another team. Let's say it is my other team there, and let's see if I post that link and then post that. Yeah, it does link across to that link there. It brings you back in. That's it brings you through to a copy of the original post. I would say, looking at that, I probably would copy the content from the original post rather than bringing it in, but it looks like it does work that way if you copy the link. So I'll go back and show you how I did that again. Go back into the primary team. So on one of my posts from here. I went up to the ellipses, and you can copy a link to that original post. It's also quite useful, I would say, just to copy the content and repost it, because you've got more control from the new conversation, the editing tools. If you want to format something slightly differently, doesn't seem to be a tool, and I haven't come across a tool to easily just repost the same thing and bring it back out. Another question for me, and how can you stop a child from muting each other and kicking them out of a meeting? So the last two questions about meetings and admitting child into the meetings, we've got another one of these sessions about running meetings and managing meetings. So I will note those, and we can pick those up in a future session. We're just covering posts today, but it's quite easy to do. Some of it will be controlled from policies, and some of it will be controlled from the meetings bar, but we can go through those on the session when we have about meetings itself. You can also draw people's attention into a post, and it's quite a useful feature. So if I wanted to make sure that a particular pupil knew that a post was important to them, you can @mention. So if you press the @ key, and if it was Jennifer I wanted to have there, it now tags them in here. So I might say, please read, this is important. And then it will notify them that they've got tagged in a post and draw their attention in. So @mentions, you press the @ key and you start typing their email address, and it will @mention them in a post. So as long as you've got @mentions enabled, it's another way to draw people's attention in for notifications. Something you will have noticed down the bottom bar is that there are dots, and that links to further apps. Your school will have chosen which apps are in here, or if not, it will be the default selection, which will be very similar to these. It's useful to get things such as, if you did a lot of forms, you can embed Microsoft Forms into here, so you can do questionnaires, or you can do surveys with your class if it's a class team, or you can even do quizzes or progress checks. So there will be more options down there to send them when they're ready. As far as today's session is concerned, it's a very narrow focus of orientation, getting started with teams, and how to use posts. We've got more sessions coming up throughout this week and next week, and you can sign up in the same place that you signed up for our session. So you can either go to www.turniton.co.uk/events, which is the events page for Turn It On, or you can also go to Microsoft Events and you can sign up there, and we will gradually go through all the different functions here in Teams: files, OneNote class notebook, assignments with grades, how to manage a meeting and record in meetings, and manage pupils coming in and out of meetings. All of those small areas that will support you in distance learning. We're having approximately half an hour each day. Are there any final questions to take from this session? Okay, well, it remains for me to say thank you very much for coming along today. I really do appreciate your time. And if you think it will be of interest to you, sign up and join us in some of the future sessions when we'll look at other areas of Teams for distance learning. But take care, and I will see some of you very soon. Thank you.